Welcome to the Cinematic Flashback Podcast. Get ready to hop into the Wayback Machine as we journey through the wild, bold, and unforgettable films of the 1970s. Each episode, we'll break down a classic movie or forgotten gem by exploring the who's who of each film, diving into the premise and plot, see how it performed then and now, and wrap things up with, did it groove through the decades or lose its beat? This week, Matt is off and enjoying a vacation at one of the luxurious Delos resorts, but never fear, because tonight we have Jeff Johnson from a Film By podcast taking a hold of the reins and helping us get to our destination, 1973's Westworld. Jeff, thanks for joining us tonight.
Hey, I am excited to be here. I can tell you right now, Matt is going to have a fantastic time. I just got back, and Chuck, it's like when you used to play as a kid, only it's real.
Yeah.
I shot six people. Well, they weren't real people. Okay.
Well, I just could not. I don't know. I just couldn't afford the per night rate of $1,000. I mean, man, that was going to take a long time to be able to get that kind of scratch up.
Think about this. In today's money, that's like $3,000. You know?
Wow. Oh man. Well, we are talking about 1973's science fiction thriller Westworld. But before we go ahead and jump into it, let's hear a clip from the original trailer.
MGM presents Westworld.
Your attention, please. We will soon be landing at Westworld, the ultimate resort.
We have you on grid 5, over.
It consists of 3 worlds of the past.
Locking in now.
Worlds where you can live out your every fantasy. There's Roman world, the lusty, decadent delights of imperial Pompeii.
Notify ground crews.
Medieval world, chivalry and combat in 13th century Europe. And Westworld, lawless violence on the American frontier of 1880.
Bacon, cinnamon toast.
Each resort is maintained by reliable computer technology and peopled by lifelike robot men and women. Our technology is designed to provide all this in complete safety. In Westworld, frustrations find release. Desire ends in satisfaction.
Let me handle it.
And all in a controlled environment.
That's not supposed to happen.
We know you'll enjoy your stay in Westworld,
Hold it.
the ultimate resort,
Let me do it this time.
where nothing can possibly go wrong.
I'm shot.
Go wrong.
Raw.
Go wrong.
Oh my God.
Shut down. Shut down immediately.
Westworld from MGM. Starring Yul Brynner, Richard Benjamin, and James Brolin. Westworld, the ultimate resort. Boy, do we have a vacation for you.
Westworld was released November 21st, 1973, written and also directed by first-time director Michael Crichton. It was produced by MGM for $1.2 million, but it eventually made $16 million after its 1976 re-release prior to its sequel, Future World. And, by the way, Westworld was MGM's biggest box office hit that year, which was not bad for a low-budget sci-fi film from a first-time director. It also spawned not just one television series, but 2 television series. So I'm going to guess you're familiar with the incredibly excellent 2016 HBO version of Westworld. But there was also a 1980s version called Beyond Westworld. Did you ever see Beyond Westworld?
I have to be honest with you. I thought this was a situation where I had seen everything in the universe. Never had heard of Beyond Westworld until I did a little homework here. And based on what I read, I could kind of understand why I never saw it.
Did you ever watch the sequel, Future World?
Yes, 1976.
Yeah.
Chuck, on our show we even did a limited series on 76, and we didn't get to cover it, unfortunately, because there's only so much time to hit the big ones. But I know Future World wasn't as well received, but it's still got a place in my heart. I dug it.
Growing up in that time frame, and this is part of the if I was to call it a limited series to steal from you a little bit, this might be from the science fiction films of the 70s. That's not Star Wars or Close Encounters of the Third Kind. Westworld, I thought when I was little, I thought it was really great. There's a lot of it, though, that honestly, it went over my head completely as a kid. So it was fun kind of coming back and watching it again.
Definitely. It's one of those where you watch this as a kid and you're fascinated because there's cowboys, there's robots, there's gunfights.
Mm-hmm.
You watch it as an adult and there's so much subtext going on.
Yes.
That you just can't pick that up as a kid.
What I actually really appreciated more about watching it this time was I am now more familiar with the actors who are in the film.
Yep.
So, for example, I don't even know if at the time I knew who Yul Brynner was, let alone, I think if anything, I would have known him from The King and I, because that would be a musical that my mom would have watched. But it was years later after this one that I saw The Magnificent Seven. And I'm sitting there looking at him going, I've seen this guy before in another film. Not this guy, the actor, this character in another film before.
Is it too early to discuss his wardrobe? Because
No, go right ahead.
Chuck, I absolutely love that he is dressed exactly as his character Chris in The Magnificent Seven. I mean, right down to the way he wears his gun belt. It's perfect. The hat, everything. It's a nice little nod.
Going back and watching it and kind of for that first time really starting to pull that together and seeing that and kind of going, okay, this is one of the things that I was saying when I was little, that it went way over my head. I had no idea about that relationship between the two, but you see it today and absolutely, you see Chris right away.
Brynner's filmography is mixed as far as my viewing. So I saw Westworld. The first time I saw it, I recognized Ramses from the Ten Commandments. Ooh. And I had not seen The Magnificent Seven. So when I saw The Magnificent Seven years later, I was like, wow, that's kind of cool. He looks just like he did in Westworld, But then and as a kid, like my brain didn't figure out, like, wait, Magnificent Seven was before Westworld. So, but I absolutely love it. I love the homage.
Unfortunately, at this time, I think Yul Brynner was struggling financially when he took the role.
Yeah. Do we have a minute to talk about that?
Yeah.
So let's just talk about what he's making on this movie. So his salary is $75,000. And I know that sounds like a lot in 1973, but that was pretty low for a star of his stature. I mean, like you said, you mentioned The King and I, The Ten Commandments, The Magnificent Seven, Anastasia.
Yep.
He pretty much got lowballed because the same year, 1973, Robert Redford and Paul Newman are doing The Sting, and they each got 500,000 plus points. And I feel bad, looking at someone as great as Yul Brynner, because he was in financial ruin at this point. He had to take the offer because it's like a fire sale. He's got to do whatever he can. He's one of these guys that had dual citizenship, Russia, Switzerland, United States, and he lost everything due to tax penalties from the IRS because his tax exemption status while taking up residence in Switzerland ran out. He was an American working abroad. It got revoked, and this ruins him financially.
What about Richard Benjamin as Peter Martin?
So I know Benjamin better as an 80s director because he directs one of my favorite films from 1986. Talk about The Money Pit.
The Money Pit.
Yeah, he did My Stepmother's an Alien in 1988. So I know him as a director. I don't know him as an actor. Even looking back into his filmography, I was like, yeah, I just haven't seen a lot of this guy's work. As far as his performance, I think he does great as Peter Martin because, to be fair, I'm annoyed by him. He's not he's not buying into the fun of the park when he first gets there. He's kind of a soft character. and it's going to be like his trial by fire going up against the gunslinger that makes him the hero. Because you're watching this and it's like he's the sidekick. He's not going to make it to the end of this movie, and it's kind of a shock the first time you see this that he is the hero of the story.
I know Benjamin more as a director as well, but he has a soft spot in my heart for a role he played in a TV series from the late 70s or early 80s called Quark.
Yeah, we
had
this bit. I was like, wait, what is this? And I didn't respond. I wasn't being rude when I didn't respond. I was just like, what?
No.
I'm not catching the joke, and I don't want to look like I'm not cool. So tell me about this character real quick.
Richard Benjamin played the titular character Quark, and he was the intergalactic garbage man. And the model of the picture that I sent you was the model of their ship that was in the TV show.
Okay.
And if they made more than 3 or 4 episodes of that show before it was, canned and gone out, I don't know. But that for me was like the first time that I remembered the name of Richard Benjamin. And then the next time it came back up was later on when I started seeing him in the 80s as a film director. But I have to agree with you. And I even today, having not seen Westworld in a long time, I thought that James Brolin's John was going to be the main character. And what's really interesting was that he was a relative newcomer at this time, having mostly appeared in shows like, Marcus Welby, MD on TV.
This is early Brolin. He hasn't established himself. He's not the movie star that we know him as. And he just has that hero look. He's got that lantern jaw, he's the broad-shouldered, he's the good-looking guy. Yeah. He's been to Westworld several times. He's got like the pass, I guess,
He's got the pass. Yeah. That's hilarious. He's only paying $800, or maybe he's paying more for the fast pass.
Yeah,
he's got some of the attractions.
I believe he's got the fast passes. The way he talks. I love that he's like the guide for this guy.
Yeah.
And what I really enjoy about their friendship that we see on the screen is that it's very evident that John is there to show Peter a good time, to get him out of whatever funk he's in. We kind of get a little bit of a backstory. There's a divorce going on, and Peter's been down in the dumps. So John Blaine is the friend you want to have. He's going to take you on some amazing adventure to get your mind, hit a reset, and get your life back on track. Chuck, I do have a question. Like you mentioned, these guys are relatively new on, they're not stars yet. My understanding is that James Brolin beats out William Shatner for this role because they wanted to cast younger and ensure that Brynner was the top billed star. Is that correct?
The casting of this movie was not on lock until like about 2 days prior to beginning to shoot the film on it. And could you imagine having William Shatner in this? What would that movie have been like?
It's probably a better movie. Let's be honest. And I say that. Listen, Chuck, we're gonna be a little biased here because we're both Star Trek fans. So
yeah,
I have to say, like, as much as I love James Brolin, I think Shatner just shatting all over this movie, with his mannerisms would have just been delicious. I think it would have been great. Shatner versus Yul Brynner. Come on.
Sure. There was a Star Trek actress on this show.
I would be doing a disservice to my friends on our Phaser Set to Stun series if I did not immediately recognize Nurse Chapel in this movie. As soon as I saw that face, I said, "Hey, there's Christine."
Yeah,
absolutely.
As Miss Carey, the proprietor of the saloon down the way that we don't talk about at dinner, not over this dinner table.
Not at this dinner table. Yeah, Majel Barrett. Is that how you pronounce her name?
I always call her Majel, but probably really well.
Hey, you listen. Going head to head in Star Trek trivia, you are going to beat me every day of the week and twice on Sunday. So I'll say Magil for the rest of this episode.
Someone else too, that it was really interesting that the minute he came on screen, I knew him because just a week or so before I came across him on YouTube. And that would be Alan Oppenheimer, who played the chief supervisor. Now, he was known to me back in my youth as Dr. Rudy Wells, who was on the $6 Million Man, who was the doctor who actually made Steve Austin better, faster, and stronger. But I would assume, or I would think he's more well known for his voice acting.
I know him for his voice acting because while I remember reruns of the $6 Million Man, my brain's going straight to Steve Austin and Lindsay Wagner. But his voice acting, the Neverending Story, he gives us the voice of Falkor, the Rockbiter, the terrifying, Gamork, and obviously the all-time role for him, Skeletor. And
that was he was doing some conventions or something, and he was promoting them, and he was reading memes in Skeletor's voice, and I'm telling you, he looks about the same as he does in this movie.
Yeah.
To hear Skeletor coming out of his mouth is really weird.
The man is 94 years old. He's still doing convention appearances. He's still doing the voice for fans, and you can see the glee on his face when he does it.
Yeah.
This is a guy that embraced it and knows this was his bread and butter.
Well, and we were talking about William Shatner, and you guys do a lot of conventions.
Oh yeah.
William Shatner is the same, but I would imagine that the experience of meeting Alan Oppenheimer versus William Shatner would be a lot different.
I can tell you this. I met William Shatner 2 years ago, and the consummate professional. The guy was he was laughing, he was having a good time, he was sharing stories. I know he's 90 years old, but he does not look it. He does not sound it. So more power to him. He's fantastic. Now for me, if I could just find one of these that Alan Oppenheimer goes to, that would be the dream for me. Cause I've met Peter Cullen, and to have a conversation with Optimus Prime. He's hearing that all day long. And I was the one guy that said, I loved Venger. And he looked up, he's like, are you seriously? You're a Venger fan? I said, more than Optimus I am. Venger was one of the baddest. So yeah.
Wow.
I've met Venger. If I could meet Skeletor, I'd be on cloud nine.
Some of the behind the scenes trivia that I found, one of them I thought was very interesting, which was later in the film, there's a scene where they are giving Yul Brynner's gunslinger some upgrades.
Yep.
They're giving him some, upgrades to his hearing. They're giving him upgrades to his sight. And this led to a very pixelated view, which could have been one of the earliest uses of computer-generated imagery in a feature film.
Yeah, my understanding, the digital photography here it's groundbreaking in 1973, which is funny because if there's one thing that's dated in this film, it's the gunslinger's POV, because you're just like, wow, this isn't even Nintendo 8-bit graphic good. This is like Atari good,
It's like giant blocks. And there's one scene where Peter is up on a ridge and the gunslinger takes out his rifle and wings him. And I'm like, how did he even see him in that pixelated view?
Yeah, I couldn't tell you. I could only imagine if they did a George Lucas style upgrade of this and they changed the POV of the gunslinger, what it would look like, how good it would look. Oh.
Yeah, the directors or the special edition.
Yeah. Not that I'm wanting that, because again, I love this has its place in cinematic history. And it's nice to see little milestones like this was cutting edge in 1973. So I like that.
One of the things that was an inspiration to Michael Crichton for the idea of Westworld was a trip to Disneyland.
You're kidding me.
And he was writing he was looking at the animatronics of the Pirates of the Caribbean ride. And that just started to brew in him this idea of an amusement park gone wrong. And he took one swipe at that with this movie. And this movie, for me, there's a little bit of disjointedness that we'll get into. But, there was a line in a movie that said,
nothing worked. Yeah, but John, if the Pirates of the Caribbean breaks down, the pirates don't eat the tourists.
And that was the movie.
It's Jurassic Park.
That was the movie that Jurassic Park.
Yeah, you gotta, I liked it. That's, he has that experience in the, early 70s, and then that makes its way into Jurassic Park. I love it. That's great. That's full circle.
The corporation greed in this movie didn't really fully get fleshed out because they ended up having to cut out so many scenes in this movie just due to the pacing and the budget constraints. And it's probably one of the reasons why you don't see much of Roman World.
I would have to believe that, because I know everyone passes on this project, with exception to MGM, who at the time is a little notorious for being very difficult with filmmakers. A lot of people, Kubrick had passed on him. Robert Altman had passed on him, I believe. When you're trying to get in the door, you're going to, whichever one opens is the one you got to walk through. So I get why Crichton's there. But my understanding is MGM is on him like a starving man on a ham sandwich. The script changes every day. They're weighing down on him, Chuck. So yeah, you're right. You're absolutely right. There's some pacing issues, and I have to believe it's because the money was running dry.
So, Jeff, let's talk about arriving at Delos. Leads me to an interesting question, and you started hitting on this earlier. If you were visiting the Delos property today, which one would you choose? Would you go for Westworld, Medieval World, or Roman World?
I'm heading to Westworld. And if you'll let me quote Richard Benjamin, I'll tell you why. He once said this was the only way he was ever going to get to make a Western or a sci-fi film. And I'm quoting him here. So when you get to do stuff that's like you're 12 years old, all of the reasons you went to the movies in the first place, you're out there firing a 6-shooter, riding a horse, being chased by a gunman, and all of that, it's the best. How do you not want to go to Westworld?
What I saw of Roman World did not appeal to me. And you didn't see much of it. And they kind of just implied that you're going to live out your, whatever fantasy you want to, go to Roman World.
The thing about the other world, so if I'm going to Roman World, I think your best option is to be the emperor, right? Or a senator, because I would want to be I want to be a gladiator, Chuck. I want to be in the ludus, but let's be honest, that's not going to be overly enjoyable. Like there's a great moment when Richard Benjamin, when they get to the hotel, and he's kind of complaining that early on he's still kind of acting like he's like, wow, you'd think for $1,000 a day they could make this a little more comfortable. And Brolin's like, hey, that's the whole point. It wasn't back in the Old West. So
this is very authentic.
Yeah, very authentic. So while I think it'd be awesome to go to Roman World and be a gladiator, or it'd be awesome to go to the medieval world and be a knight, you're not really getting to enjoy the spoils as you would in the Old West, where it's lawless. There's just, you do whatever you want.
It's definitely called Westworld because, we want to see the Westworld in it. Oh, by the way, are you wearing a gun strap that is strapped, or is it open?
I always go open.
Okay. I was going to tie to my leg, but they arrive, they check into their lodgings, and the first thing they do is they head out to the saloon where they get into their first gunfight. They then go and visit the local brothel. They find themselves in another shootout. They break out of jail. They have a showdown with the sheriff, and they end up in a rowdy bar brawl. Jeff, hearing all of that, what is your first Delos bucket list? What kind of trouble are you going to get yourself into?
I got to be honest, while the brothel is quite tempting, I want to do the one thing these guys didn't get the opportunity to do, and that's a train robbery.
Oh, yes.
Because that
I was going to say rob the bank.
Well, that's where I first went to, like a good old fashioned bank robbery with the bandana over your face. But I was like, no, I want to be on the horse. I want the train. I want the old fashioned train robbery. Ride up to the train, jump on, grab the gold, jump back off. That's the bucket list item for me.
There was a scene when they first get into town, and there's like a whole bunch of cowboys on their horses just riding into town. And I thought, man, I hope those are actual guests and not all robots, because that to me is the fun part, coming in. And I also kind of like the banker who the kind of the mousy guy.
Isn't that Dick Van Patten?
That was Dick Van Patten, better known.
King Roland, Spaceballs.
He was funny in a couple of ways. Number one, did Taxi Driver steal from Westworld? The scene of him, or was that maybe stolen from or inspired Marty McFly in Back to the Future 3, where it kind of crossed the you talking to me, and maybe his character, the banker character, trying to quick draw the gun, and shooting the mirror accidentally.
The mirror out, I got to ask you a question though, Chuck.
Yeah,
because your first time watching this, my always thought goes to, it's not just you and your buddy in Westworld. There's other people have paid to go in there, and they're in there. And Richard Benjamin has the question, like, what? How do I know who's who? And Brolin's like, you don't. We don't know who's who. And it's like, well, how do I know I'm not going to kill somebody? And there's safety measures. But here's my question, Chuck. Because I'm assuming you're going to Westworld, correct?
Absolutely.
Okay. So, do you have any concerns? I know you're not concerned about someone shooting you, another patron shooting you, but are any concerns, like when you're caught in the brawl, the barroom brawl, that another paying customer is going to slug you right in the face, or get a little too physical? Like, how do you stop that from happening?
So you have these safety rules, but even being experienced as John is in the gunslinger encounter in the bar, John is the first person hopping over the bar, hiding, taking cover from this. Talking about, though, the safety rules, let me ask you this. If you can't be shot, that there's no harm to you, does that decrease your enjoyment of it?
I would kind of compare it to laser tag when that was a big thing.
Yeah.
I wasn't worried about getting shot and killed, but jumping off of those blocks and behind structures and stuff like that, if I'm going to jump, 6 feet down to the floor below me, it's going to hurt if I don't, if I don't watch what I'm doing.
Oh yeah.
And it's pitch black in there because everything's glowing. So I think there's going to be a sense of real world danger, but not of death by gunfire.
Right. But at some point, the system starts to break down. They hint at a virus spreading from one of the park properties to the next, finally making its way to Westworld, where I think it was John who actually gets bitten by a rattlesnake.
Yes.
And he's like, oh, it's not supposed to happen.
Did you know that
it draws blood?
Did you know that snake actually bit him?
That was going to be a question I was wanting to look up, was whether or not that was a real snake or not.
So it's a real snake. They had milked the fangs so that when it bites, it's not be venomous, obviously. Brolin's got the padding on his arm that you can't see. What they didn't account for was that the snake has teeth on the bottom of its jaw. So when it clamped down, the bottom of his arm got bit. And so you see that reaction where he's like, Brolin's a talented actor, but he's getting bit for real there, Chuck.
Yeah. You're a guest at Westworld. Everything's starting to go haywire. What's your first move?
If it's starting to go haywire, I'm looking for the exit, honestly. Like, some of these saloon doors and these barn doors, like at night when they're cleaning up and they're parking the trucks in there, I'm looking for the exit sign.
But, we talked about Jurassic Park earlier. They had the same idea going here, that all of a sudden where you were completely assured that everything was completely safe, but then things start to go all pear-shaped on you. So now we have, by the time that the gunslinger is starting to relentlessly pursue Peter, Westworld is just completely fallen apart. And this chase to me starts to feel like a proto-slasher sequence.
Absolutely.
With an unstoppable villain. Did this have influences on movies like Halloween or Terminator?
I feel that there is absolutely a presence of Westworld in Halloween. If you told me Arnold used this as the template for the T-800.
When I read it, it just happens to be that not too long ago, I saw the movie Westworld with Yul Brynner, who played a machine. And he played the toughest of the toughest. You know, Yul Brynner is a fantastic actor. And he played the toughest kind of cowboy and shooter. And when he was in the bar and I saw him, the way he acted, but everything was kind of off because it was not like a human being, but you couldn't identify really, there's something wrong here, but you couldn't identify exactly what it was until later on when you saw that at night they took them apart and they fixed the machines. And I said, that's what it was. I knew the way his eye movement was, the way his head was kind of a little bit more jerky, and every move was a little off. So I remember all that. And I was fascinated by that because I've never seen that on film, someone acting like a machine. So I told James Cameron, I said, look, there's this one thing that you got to make sure of, is that whoever plays Terminator, and I heard it's O.J. Simpson, I said, but whoever plays it, I said, you got to train them to be a machine. Not to act like a machine, to be a machine.
It would not surprise me in the least bit because Brenner's movements, his physical acting, because let's be honest, he only has, like 3 lines total? He doesn't really get to talk in this. He's using his physicality, his body, to do his acting. And you're absolutely right. I see a lot of the shape in his movements, especially when they're in the catacomb, behind the scenes area where they're going down the hallways, the dark hallways.
Yep.
It feels very Halloween to me, and his movements definitely feel Terminator-like.
The film is about an hour and 25-ish minutes. Yep. It's not even an hour and a half
89 minutes, 88 minutes maybe.
Yeah. Maybe the last 30 minutes is when the movie really starts to kick in and it finds its groove in it, if you will.
I will. Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, because the stuff beforehand is just all setting up and acting out the various fantasies of either the cowboy fantasy or the knight in the medieval world trying to woo the queen and getting snubbed by the robot and everything starting to fall apart. But the last half, it picked up so quickly. And all of a sudden, the gunslinger shows back up again. And now they start their final chase. Mm-hmm. Peter Martin, he starts off hesitant, but he becomes a survivor. How would you compare him to reluctant sci-fi heroes like Ripley or Sarah Connor?
I have to say Ripley and Sarah leave this guy in the dust. No pun intended in the, because he's on the Old West. The difference here between Sarah Connor and Ellen Ripley, I feel like they're strong from the get-go. Maybe not so much Sarah Connor if we're talking Terminator, because she finds her strength in the first movie. But Ellen Ripley, 100%, she's just a badass from the get-go.
Right from the beginning.
Yeah. Now, if we're saying, Peter and Sarah Connor, I see a lot more similarities there,
Okay.
And ironically, they're both weak characters that find their strength going up against an unstoppable robot. So
right. Ellen was always in command of her role. She knew who she was, and she had no doubts about that. I mean, she was willing to prevent the crew members from coming back onto the ship. But Sarah, yes, she was definitely someone who grew into that.
The big difference between Ripley and Peter and Sarah are that Ripley was always confident, whereas the other two had to build their confidence. They had to find their inner strength. So while I would love to think Peter, had he showed up in Future World, like I would have loved to think that he's, an experienced, hardened person, and maybe he has a little more edge to him. I see him more of like a trauma survivor, like He's never okay after this. He went on a vacation with his best friend. His best friend got killed. He nearly got killed.
Mm-hmm.
I think this guy never recovers.
In the HBO series Westworld, I always wanted to see Peter show up in some strange way in that show.
That would have been cool, especially in later seasons where we're kind of going outside of Westworld. I could see Peter being more of an advocate on the dangers of parks like this and technology beyond our control. That's where I see his person. Maybe he's like a politician that's trying to shut him down.
Yeah, I was going to say, he could play the person who is trying to do good, and we sympathize with what he's gone through, but he's, maybe more of the, bad guy, because I think one of the things that show did such a great job at was you sympathized so much with the robots in that show.
Well,
it had such great depth.
That's what made that show just must-see TV, because where we watch Westworld in 1973, we're looking at the movie through Peter and John. They're our avatars.
Mm-hmm.
We're like, wow, what would we do in that situation? These evil robots, this uprising. And then you jump to 2016, and now we're looking through the lens of the robots, and are they real people? Do they have rights? Do they have feelings?
Mm-hmm.
And all of a sudden, the evil entity is man. It's not the robots. So, and I'm with you on your thought of, is it happening in the same world? I like to think of the HBO series not as a soft reboot, but more of a legacy sequel. I like the idea of, obviously this park had its issues. It maybe is facing bankruptcy. Someone buys it for cheap, and the technology has always been there, and they've just been slowly fixing the problem, so to speak. So I like the idea that they're connected and it's the same universe.
Sounds kind of like the Jurassic World, where it's in the same universe as Jurassic Park, and it does acknowledge that these other incidents had happened once upon a time, but don't worry, we have all the kinks worked out.
Yeah, under new management, Chuck. Chuck, one thing about the chase, because like you said, the gunslinger is almost like the Shape. He's stalking Peter. There's this great moment, and one thing I love about this show, Cinematic Flashback, because it makes me. I've told you this before. Like sometimes I'm like, I can't wait to go rewatch this movie. Sometimes I'm like, wait, what is this? I've never heard of this movie, and now I have to go see it. But the great thing about the 70s, like you got to remember, this is practical effects. So the scene where Peter is kind of cornered in the lab, and the one technician on the golf cart told him, like, hey, you can try fire, you can try this, but if he's gonna get you. Like the guy's no help. But when he throws the acid at Yul Brynner's face and immediately just starts bubbling and fizzing and smoking.
That was...
I'm looking at him like, how do they do that? And the answer, Chuck, is so amazing and it's so simple. So Yul Brynner is wearing oil-based makeup that has crushed up Alka-Seltzer mixed into it.
What?
Yes. So when you throw water in Yul Brynner's face, the Alka-Seltzer immediately starts reacting to it, so it starts bubbling and fizzing, and that's all it was, man. Like hats off to the guys in the 60s and the 70s that were creating special effects like this, because I know we always immediately think of like, George Lucas and ILM and how they created all this cool stuff, but even 6 years, 10 years before them, it's like, hey, what if we just crush up Alka-Seltzer and rub it on his face and then throw water in it?
See how that works out? I thought that was very effective. But then afterwards, you could start to see some of obviously the makeup effect is not, say, as gratuitous as Arnold was going to have in the Terminator with all these different fixtures that they could put on to make it. You can see the endoskeleton underneath it. But you are seeing some breaks in the face. I thought it was really charming that, as they take a robot up at night to get repaired, I mean, you quite literally have circuit boards in there.
Yes.
There was something just very charming about the tech that they had in there. And I know, like, if I'm looking at that back then, to me, okay, that's a robot right there because it's got a computer board in it. And then finally, they did the greatest, like one of my favorite special effects. I don't care how many times I see this. I love it. Catching a person on fire. I mean, that is just such a great effect. And I cannot believe I saw the person when they shot that, and they always end it. And you think, man, this guy's dead. No, they're coming out. They're smiling.
It will never cease to amaze me, the fire effect, because as cool as it looks and as long as we've been doing it, you have to remember it's still incredibly dangerous. They are literally lighting the stuntman on fire. And sometimes it doesn't work out. I mean, Kane Hodder is permanently scarred for his work. He did some stunt work on an 86 film called Avenging Force, where they catch him on fire. We covered this on our Patreon. They light him up on fire. He's on the roof, and the fire is too hot. It burned through. So even when you meet him at conventions, he's still to this day he wears gloves. He doesn't. You'll never see him without his gloves on because he's still scarred. So it's a very scary thing. When you see these guys do this, because they have got everything's got to be clicking. Everything's got to be right to the second. Someone's got to be right there off camera with the extinguisher and the heavy blanket, and if the makeup's not applied right, bad things can happen. So you
don't see as many of these kind of stunt works these days. No. And one of the things that Matt and I will always talk about is that this was before the days of CGI, and we talk about how even in a film that is like this, the amount of practical effects, whether you're getting thrown out of a second story floor or you're catching someone on fire, the stuntmen in this film are earning their keep throughout the entire picture. They do some really good gags in it.
They do.
So the big question is, Jeff, does Westworld still groove, or did it skip a beat? What's your take?
My take is that this still grooves. We've got over the decades, we've got some cool video games. We've got several TV series. We've got an amazing one with HBO's Westworld. There was talk of remakes back in the early 2000s. Arnold was going to play the gunslinger at one point. That didn't happen but that didn't happen so that we could get the HBO show. So I'm okay with that. But watching this again, I've watched it 3 times the past 2 weeks, and I just don't get tired of it. It's fun. It's a fun. It's a you said 88 minutes, 89 minutes. It's about an amusement park, and it is an amusement park. You enjoy the ride. Yeah, I'm grooving with this one, Chuck. How about you?
That's a great assessment of it. It is an amusement ride, and the film does not ask that much of you. I think maybe the pacing of the first half might not necessarily be up to standards for an action thriller. This film did lay the groundwork that was to come for science fiction action in the cinemas. The theme of technology that goes wrong and corporate negligence, we're going to see that all throughout science fiction of the 80s, like with RoboCop. And then, of course, you get it come full circle again and much more refined and much better stated in Jurassic Park. But Westworld deserves credit for being ahead of its time in addressing these concerns. So I don't think that this film's influence can be understated. I obviously really feel that it had impact on James Cameron. I think it had impacts on John Carpenter. It took a big swing with pioneering of CGI to explore artificial intelligence running amok. So modern audience may find some of the aspects dated, but my gosh, the core story, and especially Yul Brynner's performance. If you don't know anything about Yul Brynner and you only see him in this film, it still packs a punch. And this one definitely grooves, even if some of the steps are a little bit creaky. Before we wrap up, Jeff, tell us what's coming up next on a Film By Podcast.
Chuck, as you already know, we've been having a pretty good week over on a Film By Podcast. We finally got around to doing another Steven Spielberg film. David and I talked about Duel, which was one of my favorites. Yesterday, your buddies, my buddies, the guys on the bridge over at Phaser Set to Stun covered arguably one of the not so great Star Trek films. They did The Final Frontier. We had to do it, Chuck. We're covering them all, so we had to do it. But we got some fun stuff coming up. I know we're going to talk about Gavin O'Connor. We're going to cover The Accountant, and we've got The Raid, great film by Gareth Evans. I don't know if you've seen that one. That'll wrap up our April, and then May, we're going to kick off Bill Paxton month. Every episode we drop is going to be Bill Paxton related, whether he starred in it or directed it. So got some fun stuff coming up over there. Thank you.
Man, I love me some Bill Paxton. It's really interesting. I need to get up on Duel because that was one that I was starting to pencil in. I am finishing the book, The Movie Brats, and the very last movie brat that they are covering is Steven Spielberg. And, he starts off his first big TV movie was Duel, and it surprised a lot of people. So I'm looking forward to hearing what you guys have to say about that.
Yeah, we had a lot of fun, and it's one of those things like Chuck, because you've been on the show several times with us. We never cover the blockbuster movie. Like, we're always going to go for the underrated film. And
right.
When you say the name Spielberg, what are you talking about? What is actually considered underrated? So we had to dig a little deep, and one of our listeners actually was like, I love Duel. Please talk about Duel. So what? Let's do Duel. So I hope you enjoy it.
Okay. Since you guys grabbed Duel, I'm calling dibs on Sugarland Express.
I would love to hear you and Matt discuss Sugarland Express, provided Matt does return from Delos. I'm a little worried. Now that we've talked about it, I'm a little worried about him, to be honest with you.
That's all for us on this episode of the Cinematic Flashback. Thanks again to Jeff Johnson for joining us. Let us know if you've watched Westworld and what did you think about it. You can do so by emailing us at podcast@cinematicflashback.com or leave a comment on our Facebook page, the Cinematic Flashback Podcast. You can find us on X. Our handle is @Back270sMovies. And please be sure to subscribe so you don't miss an episode. The best way you can share this show is to recommend us. We deeply appreciate the feedback that we've been receiving, so please keep it coming. Also, as we're trying to build this show, we would deeply appreciate a review on the platform you are listening to. And if you enjoyed the show, please give us a 5-star review so we can reach more listeners. So join us next time as we take the Wayback Machine to the 70s to explore another film from that decade.